Most people know Abraham as the father of Isaac and Ishmael, but the Bible records something more: 6 other sons, brothers of Ishmael, whose names are written yet whose stories vanish into silence. Where did they go? What nations rose from them? And could their descendants still be among us today? In the ancient sands of the Middle East, where the deserts whisper secrets of forgotten ages, the story of Abraham's family still echoes. We know Ishmael, the son of Abraham and Hagar, whose descendants became a great multitude. But Ishmael did not stand alone. He had brothers, children born to Abraham through Sarah, through Keturah, and through the promise of God. Their names are etched into scripture, yet their destinies seem scattered to the winds. Who were these brothers, and where are their descendants today? When we open the book of Genesis, the record is clear. Abraham was promised to be the father of many nations. Not just one, not just Israel, not just Ishmael, but a multitude. From Sarah, Abraham fathered Isaac, the child of promise. From Hagar, he fathered Ishmael. And later, from Keturah, Abraham had 6 more sons: Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shuah. Each of these men carried the blood of Abraham, and each one gave rise to clans, tribes, and nations. Yet over the centuries, the identities of these peoples seem to blur into the shifting landscape of history. Consider Midian, for example. His descendants, the Midianites, appear often in the Bible. They were traders, warriors, and at times enemies of Israel. It was in Midian that Moses fled after killing the Egyptian, and it was in Midian where he encountered the burning bush that changed the course of history. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, was a Midianite priest, yet he honored the God of Israel. The Midianites later fought against Gideon, only to be defeated in one of the most unlikely battles recorded in the book of Judges. But after these scattered mentions, the Midianites vanish. Where did they go? Did they dissolve into the surrounding Arab tribes, swallowed by time, their name erased, but their bloodline living on? And what of Shuah, one of Abraham's lesser-known sons? His descendants became the Shuhites, and we catch only a faint glimpse of them in the Bible through Bildad the Shuhite, one of Job's friends. After that, the trail goes cold. Some scholars suggest that the Shuhites merged with other tribes in Mesopotamia, absorbed into the great Assyrian and Babylonian empires. Could it be that the people who once traced their lineage back to Abraham through Shuah are now counted among the forgotten tribes of the Middle East? Then there is Jokshan. His descendants include Sheba and Dedan, names that appear repeatedly in the scriptures and even in end-times prophecies. Sheba brings to mind the Queen of Sheba, who visited Solomon with treasures, wisdom, and questions. Some traditions link Sheba to Ethiopia or Yemen, tying Abraham's bloodline to both Africa and Arabia. Dedan, meanwhile, is connected to the caravan routes of Arabia, famous for trade and wealth. Even Ezekiel mentions Dedan in his prophecies. But like so many of Abraham's lines, their identities fractured over centuries of migration, war, and assimilation. And what of Zimran, Medan, and Ishbak? Their names are written in the genealogies, but their histories fade almost as quickly as they appear. Some historians speculate that Zimran's descendants moved eastward into Arabia, while others argue they may have blended into the peoples along the Red Sea coasts. Medan's line is even murkier, vanishing into the desert sands. Ishbak remains the most mysterious of all, little more than a name, a shadow in the text, a reminder that Abraham's children were many, though history remembers only a few. Yet, the silence of Scripture does not mean the silence of history. Ancient records outside the Bible sometimes shed light on these descendants. Arab genealogies often trace their tribes back to Abraham through Keturah's sons. Islamic tradition, too, recognizes Abraham as a patriarch whose children spread across nations. Could it be that many modern Arab tribes still unknowingly carry the blood of Zimran, Jokshan, or Medan? This possibility becomes even more fascinating when we consider the prophetic words spoken over Abraham. God told him, "I will make you a father of many nations." Not just Israel, not just Ishmael, but many. If this is true, then the scattered nations of the Middle East, Arabians, Ethiopians, tribes along the Red Sea, and even pockets of North Africa, may all be distant echoes of Abraham's household. His tent stretched across continents, and his legacy became larger than the eye can trace. But the story grows even more tangled when we bring Isaac back into the picture. For Isaac, the child of promise, fathered Jacob and Esau. Jacob's line became Israel, the 12 tribes we know well. Esau's line became Edom, often at odds with Israel, but also part of the family. Esau's descendants intermarried with Ishmael's line, creating a fusion of Abraham's bloodlines. Imagine this: Ishmael's children marrying Esau's children, Abraham's grandsons blending their legacies, their descendants indistinguishable from one another in time. If such unions happened often, then tracing Ishmael's brothers may be more difficult than we think. Their lines have crossed, overlapped, and merged into the vast tapestry of Middle Eastern ancestry. And what about Keturah's sons again? Midian, Jokshan, Zimran, Ishbak, Shuah. These men were not rivals to Isaac in the way Ishmael was. They were half-brothers, bound by the same father, Abraham. And though Isaac inherited the covenant, the others inherited nations. In Genesis, Abraham sends them eastward, away from Isaac, toward the land of the east. Did this eastward journey take them into Arabia, Persia, or even further into Asia? Some traditions suggest that Abraham's descendants traveled as far as India, their names altered over centuries until only faint linguistic traces remain. Could Abraham's bloodline be hiding in unexpected corners of the world? When we look at the nations surrounding Israel in the Old Testament, Moab, Ammon, Edom, Midian, Amalek, Sheba, Dedan, we realize something remarkable. Almost all of them connect in some way to Abraham's family. Whether through Ishmael, Isaac, Keturah, or Lot, the nations Israel encountered were family nations. Wars, alliances, betrayals, and marriages, these were not conflicts with strangers, but with cousins, nephews, and brothers. Abraham's household became a web of nations, united by blood but divided by destiny. And as the centuries passed, empires rose and fell: Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Rome. These empires swallowed tribes, scattered populations, and rewrote maps. The descendants of Ishmael's brothers may no longer be recognizable by name, but that does not mean they vanished. They live on in the DNA of modern peoples, in the tribes of Arabia, in the communities of North Africa, in the scattered Jewish and Arab families across the world. Abraham's children are countless, just as God promised when he told him to look at the stars. But this raises a question. If Abraham's descendants are so widespread, if Ishmael's brothers gave rise to nations that still live on today, why is their story not more widely told? Why do we know so little about Zimran, Medan, or Ishbak? Why do only Sheba and Midian leave a clear mark in history? Could it be that their stories were deliberately left hidden, waiting for the end times to resurface? After all, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and other prophets mention nations like Sheba and Dedan in their apocalyptic visions. Could these forgotten brothers play a role in the final chapters of history? The trail is faint, the evidence scattered, but the patterns remain. Ancient genealogies, prophetic scriptures, and historical migrations all point to a larger truth, that Abraham's family did not end with Isaac and Ishmael. His sons spread far and wide, their descendants interwoven with the nations of the world. And if prophecy is correct, their presence will matter again, for the Bible insists that in the last days, the nations of Abraham's bloodline will once again stand on the stage of history. When we trace the story of Abraham's lesser-known sons, archaeology sometimes whispers where scripture falls silent. Across the Arabian Peninsula, ruins of ancient cities still lie buried under layers of sand. In the deserts of northwest Arabia, inscriptions carved in early Semitic scripts mention tribes whose names resemble those of Jokshan, Dedan, and Sheba. Though weathered and fragmented, These stones seem to testify that Abraham's children left their mark, even when history books chose to forget them. Each inscription, each ruined wall, may be the faint echo of a family that once carried the blood of Abraham into unknown lands. Consider the incense routes of Arabia, stretching from Yemen up into the Levant. These caravan trails carried spices, gold, and frankincense, but they also carried genealogies, bloodlines, and cultural memories. It was along these roads that the tribes of Sheba and Dedan prospered, becoming wealthy through trade. Even the gifts of the Magi in the New Testament, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, reflect the commodities of these descendants. Could it be that the story of Ishmael's brothers is hidden not in genealogical charts, but in the very economy of the ancient world? Linguistics adds another layer of mystery. The names Zimran, Medan, and Ishbak appear rarely in history, but traces of similar-sounding tribal names appear in Assyrian and Babylonian records. Ancient scribes recorded the names of peoples they conquered or traded with, and though the spellings shift across languages, echoes remain. Scholars debate whether the Medanites might have merged with the Midianites, their names nearly indistinguishable in certain dialects. If true, the biblical narrative may be less about missing tribes and more about overlapping identities. In other words, the descendants of these brothers may have survived under different names, their stories hidden in plain sight. Beyond the Middle East, migration patterns suggest that Abraham's legacy may have reached farther than we imagine. Ancient Jewish traditions speak of Abraham's children traveling eastward, settling in regions as far as India. Some claim that clans in western India trace their roots back to Abraham through Keturah's sons, their oral traditions preserving a memory long forgotten elsewhere. In Ethiopia, too, traditions link their kingship back to Sheba, tying their royal bloodline to Abraham's tent. If these stories are even partially true, then Abraham's household stretched from the banks of the Nile to the shores of the Indus. The question grows even more compelling when we turn to prophecy. Ezekiel 38 and 39, passages that describe the coming battle of Gog and Magog, mention nations like Sheba and Dedan standing on the sidelines, questioning the invasion. These names are not random. They belong to the descendants of Jokshan, Abraham's son, through Keturah. This suggests that the bloodline of Abraham, though obscured by history, resurfaces in the prophetic future. Why would God preserve these names for the end times unless their legacy mattered? Why would Sheba and Dedan be named unless their descendants still walk the earth, preparing to play their part in the drama of the last days? Even in the book of Isaiah, references to Midian and Sheba appear in contexts of restoration and worship. Isaiah 60 describes nations bringing gifts of gold and frankincense to honor the Lord, and among them are Sheba's descendants. Centuries after their apparent disappearance, prophecy places them at the center of worship in the Messianic age. This suggests that these lost brothers are not lost at all. They are simply waiting for their appointed time. But history is not without its darker shadows. Many of these descendants became adversaries of Israel at different points in time. The Midianites fought against Gideon, the Edomites opposed Israel during their wilderness journey, and the Amalekites, possibly connected through Esau's marriage to Ishmael's line, became perpetual enemies. Family became foe, cousin fought cousin, and Abraham's tent became divided. Could the wars of the Old Testament be seen not as random tribal conflicts, but as family disputes magnified across generations? If so, then understanding these descendants is not just about history, it is about understanding the very fabric of biblical conflict. Modern genetics has begun to explore these questions in new ways. Studies of Middle Eastern populations reveal remarkable continuity over thousands of years. Despite wars, exiles, and migrations, much of the DNA in Arabia, Israel, and surrounding regions remains linked to ancient Semitic roots. While we cannot yet trace a direct line from Jokshan or Ishbak to a modern tribe, The genetic evidence suggests that the descendants of Abraham's sons have not vanished. They live on, embedded within the Arab, Jewish, and even some East African populations of today. Perhaps the very people walking the streets of Riyadh, Jerusalem, or Addis Ababa unknowingly carry the blood of Abraham's forgotten sons. And then there is the cultural memory preserved in oral traditions. In Yemen, tribal genealogies are recited that trace their ancestry back to Jokshan or Jokshan, often linked to Sheba and Dedan. In Ethiopia, the Kebra Nagast describes a royal lineage that ties directly to Sheba's union with Solomon, intertwining Abraham's bloodline with the Davidic kingdom. These stories, though embellished over time, reveal an important truth. The memory of Abraham's extended family was never fully erased. It survived in legend, lore, and lineage. When we bring all these threads together, archaeology, linguistics, prophecy, oral traditions, and genetics, we begin to see a vast picture. Abraham's family did not end with the familiar stories of Isaac and Ishmael. It expanded into a web of nations, many of which still influence our world today, from the incense traders of Arabia to the royal courts of Ethiopia, from the desert tribes mentioned by Assyria to the prophetic names awaiting fulfillment. The descendants of Ishmael's brothers remain hidden, yet ever present. And perhaps this is why the Bible gives us glimpses, but not full stories. Maybe their legacy was not meant to be fully understood until the appointed time. Maybe their names, scattered across Scripture, are like prophetic breadcrumbs, leading us to watch for their re-emergence. The silence of history does not mean their absence. It means their story is still being written. When we examine the ancient world, we find that Abraham's household was more than a family. It was the seed of civilizations. His sons by Keturah, Ishmael, and Isaac were not isolated branches, but interwoven roots that stretched across deserts, mountains, and seas. What the Bible records briefly, history and tradition attempt to fill in. The question remains: what became of these brothers, and how far did their descendants wander? The rise of empires often determines who is remembered and who is forgotten. Israel preserved its story because of the covenant. Egypt etched its legacy in stone. Babylon and Assyria immortalized their conquests in clay tablets. But the clans of Abraham's lesser-known sons, wandering across deserts, living as traders and shepherds, left few monuments. Their history survives not in towering temples, but in the faintest of clues, the names of oases, the patterns of caravan routes, the oral traditions whispered among tribes who still call the desert home. Trade was their lifeline, and it carried their identity across continents. Imagine the incense caravans moving north from Sheba through Dedan past Midian into the land of Canaan. Each stop along the way was not merely a trade station, but a cultural exchange. Stories of Abraham, his sons, and his God may have traveled with the camels as much as the spices did. Could it be that Abraham's descendants left their mark, not through conquest, but through commerce, becoming the quiet architects of connections between worlds? Anthropologists studying Bedouin tribes in Arabia note that many still preserve oral genealogies stretching back thousands of years. These lineages often include names that resonate faintly with the sons of Keturah. While historians debate their accuracy, the very survival of such genealogies suggests that memory runs deep in desert cultures. In places where written history is scarce, memory becomes the archive, and names like Jokshan and Midian may still echo in ways we have yet to uncover. The silence of the Bible on these brothers is itself intriguing. Why give us their names, if not to hint at a larger story? The genealogies of Genesis are deliberate. Nothing is wasted. Every name, every lineage carries weight. Perhaps these seemingly minor sons are like seeds scattered by the wind, intended to sprout in unexpected places. Perhaps their absence from later chapters is less a disappearance and more an invitation to search, to question, to connect the dots between scripture, history, and prophecy. Later faith traditions did not ignore them. In Islamic genealogy, Abraham is central not only as the father of Ishmael, but as the patriarch of many Arab tribes. Some genealogical records trace specific clans back to Keturah's sons, embedding them into the fabric of Arabian identity. For Muslims, Abraham is not distant history, but the friend of God, their spiritual ancestor. This means that even outside of biblical preservation, the wider family of Abraham remained alive in cultural memory. Jewish tradition also offers fragments. Rabbinic writings occasionally speculate on the identities of Keturah's children, linking them to tribes known in antiquity. Though often shrouded in legend, these writings show that even in Israel's memory, the brothers of Ishmael were not fully forgotten. They were acknowledged as kin, distant but real. And then there is the possibility of dispersion far beyond the Middle East. Could Abraham's children have sailed with Phoenician traders? Could they have merged with sea peoples or traveled along the Silk Road into Asia? The eastward journey of Abraham's other sons mentioned in Genesis is vague but suggestive. To the land of the east. What does that mean? Arabia, Mesopotamia, Persia, or perhaps even further, beyond the horizon of biblical geography? Each possibility opens new doors, suggesting that Abraham-Esau's family tree may stretch into lands we rarely consider part of the biblical world. Archaeologists digging in the Levant and Arabia often find burial sites marked by standing stones, silent monuments left by nomadic peoples. Some scholars wonder if such stones were erected by Abraham's wandering descendants, markers of their presence in lands where their names were not recorded. If so, then these brothers may have left their legacy not in palaces or scrolls, but in unmarked graves beneath desert skies, waiting for the world to remember them. Even linguistics hints at survival. The name Midian appears in inscriptions outside the Bible associated with desert tribes living near the Gulf of Aqaba. Dedan and Sheba show up in Assyrian records as wealthy trading peoples. The disappearance of names like Ishbak or Zimran may not mean extinction, but transformation. Languages evolve, consonants shift, and tribal names can mutate over centuries into words unrecognizable to us, but familiar to those who lived them. If so, then the brothers of Ishmael may still be hidden under names we no longer connect to Genesis. As we follow these trails, one thing becomes clear: Abraham's family was not small, nor was it confined. It expanded like rivers, branching into deltas, flowing into every direction, feeding nations with its waters. The question of where they are now is not answered with a single nation, but with a mosaic of peoples scattered across continents. They are in Arabia, in Ethiopia, in Mesopotamia, perhaps even in South Asia. Their names may be lost, but their blood flows on. And yet, prophecy suggests their reappearance. In the visions of the prophets, names like Sheba and Dedan re-emerge, called forth in the last days. Why these names? Why these tribes? Could it be that the seemingly forgotten brothers of Ishmael hold keys to the unfolding of the future? Could their return to the stage of history be part of the tapestry God has been weaving since Abraham first looked up at the stars and believed the promise? From the tent of Abraham, history rippled outward in every direction. His sons, Ishmael, Isaac, and the children of Keturah, were not merely names written in an ancient scroll, but living roots of nations. Ishmael became the father of tribes that spread across Arabia. Isaac carried the covenant and fathered Israel. And Keturah's sons, Midian, Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Ishbak, and Shuah, birthed peoples who once thrived in deserts, mountains, and trade routes, only to fade into history's shadows. We traced Midian through Moses and Gideon, saw Sheba and Dedan shine in the wealth of trade, and glimpsed Shuah in the book of Job. We considered Zimran, Ishbak, and Medan, mysterious and silent, their trails vanishing into the sands of time. Yet silence is not erasure. Archaeology hints at them in inscriptions and ruins. Oral traditions preserve fragments of their names. Prophecy dares to call them back, placing Sheba and Dedan at the heart of the last days. The web of Abraham's family became vast, binding Israel, Arabia, and beyond into one story of kinship and conflict. Cousins became rivals, brothers became nations, and empires swallowed tribes, scattering their blood into the veins of countless peoples. Modern genetics, ancient trade routes, and enduring traditions all point to one truth. Abraham truly became the father of many nations, just as God promised when he asked him to look at the stars. So where are the lost descendants of Ishmael's brothers now? Perhaps they walk the streets of Arabia, Ethiopia, or India. Perhaps they live in tribes we no longer recognize by their ancient names. Perhaps they are closer than we think, hidden in the DNA of families across the Middle East. Their names may have been forgotten, but their presence remains, waiting, as prophecy suggests, for the final chapters of history to call them forward once again. And as we stand here, thousands of years removed from Abraham's tent, we realize his family is still shaping the world around us. Every empire, every prophecy, every modern conflict and alliance carries echoes of his children. What began as one man's obedience to God became the legacy of nations. The story is not finished. The descendants of Ishmael's brothers are not lost forever. They are waiting, woven into the fabric of time, until the day their story is told in full. Pause. Build music, swell. This is only the beginning. The shadows of the past are stirring, the forgotten tribes are whispering, and the promises of God remain unbroken. Join me in the next chapter as we continue to uncover the mysteries of Scripture, history, and prophecy, and discover how the past is still alive in our present. If you were intrigued by today's journey through the hidden descendants of Abraham's sons, make sure to like this video, share it with those who seek truth, and subscribe for more biblical mysteries brought to light. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and keep watching the unfolding of God's timeless story.